Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the food and beverage education session at SupplySide East today. The key ingredient, leveraging functional ingredients to power food and beverage products. My name is Heather Carter. I'm the associate editor of Food and Beverage Insider, one of SupplySide's media brands. Today we're going to have a lively roundtable discussion with 3 industry professionals about trending functional ingredients primed to advance food and beverage products. But first, I want to ask if you can all take out your phones. Oh, well, I'll go through some show announcements first. If you're not connected to the Wi-Fi and you're having some trouble, please do so. The Wi-Fi and password are right up on the screen. We're rounding out the expo hall today, and it closes at 4 p.m. Happy hour is currently going on right now, so hopefully some more people trickle on in as they get their drinks and snacks. And tonight is the What's Up with Sups event at NVU in Weehawken. If you haven't heard more, just go on the show app or the website to learn a little bit more about that. And now, if you can please take out your phones, we have a platform called Vvox. You just have to scan the QR code right up here. It'll open it up to our poll question. There are 3 little tabs on top. A home that will bring you to the poll, the middle where you can ask questions throughout the session, so feel free to type it in. There's like a little chat box. And then at the end, there's a survey. It'll take you about 2 minutes. If you can do that at the end of the session, that would be great. But before we get started today, I just want to ask our first question. What is the first word that comes to mind when you think of functional foods and beverages? So you can type in 1, 2, 3 words, and they'll populate on the screen. Caffeine, protein. 2 things I often see. Clean ingredients, that's a big thing. Health benefits, absolutely. We'll be diving into that today. Energy, we'll also be touching on that. Very cool. Great, well, thank you guys. Joining me today are going to be Jeff Comholz, the Director of Sales at Spins, who's going to be presenting some data to kick off the session about the current functional food and beverage landscape. Also, we'll have Risa Schulman, who's president and founder of Taproot, a New Jersey-based consulting firm, who's also a seasoned science and regulatory advisor, and as well as Philip Tebereau, co-founder and CEO at Yoleli, a CPG company that produces products using fonio, which is a gluten-free grain from West Africa. So if everyone would just join me in welcoming Jeff to the stage.
Hey everybody, afternoon. Okay, so going to be talking a little bit about functional food and beverage trends, specifically as it pertains to traditional food and beverage categories. I say that because this morning I spoke about pretty much exclusively vitamins, minerals, and supplements categories. So we're going to be looking at traditional food and beverage categories here. What are the kinds of ingredients and trends that we're seeing start to emerge? What's driving the growth? Why it's driving the growth? And a couple examples. So to level set a little bit, we took a look at total food and beverage, right? So what we have here is our frozen, grocery, and refrigerated sections. So total food and beverage is experiencing decelerating growth. So it's still growing overall, but as you can see from 2 years ago, it went from 11%, a year ago it went to 3%. So the decelerating growth on a 2-year CAGR is 7%. I'm gonna stop using acronyms. I promise very soon. But what's interesting here is functional grocery is gaining share from functional refrigerated. So this is where definitions are important. Spins has functional food and beverage defined as, if we're tracking it as one of our functional ingredients, we track over 600 functional ingredients from all across the store, and it's contributing to here. So that's where the percentages started to shift from previous total to now focus on functionality. But functional grocery products are gaining share from frozen and refrigerated. Gaining growth and functionality with over a point compared to the other ones, which when you're talking about $600 billion is still a pretty significant dollar number there. Where it gets interesting is when we start to look into, okay, great, that's the macro. Then we start to get into specific food and beverage categories here. So as we look at, say, yogurt, right, the pre and the probiotics of yogurt, right, are contributing to that 6% total growth there when food is only growing at 2% total. And everybody taking pictures, please feel free. I can also send out the slides afterwards, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. But again, what's interesting here, we highlighted these this morning. Energy and sports drinks, again, up 7% on a $12 billion base. Those are pretty significant dollars. And energy is, one of the macro trends that we're going to see, and those ingredients are contributing to growth pretty much across the board. Interestingly enough, here you see kombucha and other functional beverages as a call out, up 6%. Kombucha as a breakout is actually down. Other functional beverages there, other adaptogens, other herbs are contributing to some of that growth. So interesting for me to kind of see how that functional beverage category starts to develop a little bit further. We see down on the left some traditional, what you would call indulgence categories, right? Cookies, snack bars, ice cream novelties. We're going to start to see a little bit more about intentional indulgence coming up here soon. Okay, this is a great slide. There's a lot of data points on here, and the bubbles aren't that big, so I might be coming back to, but again, we can send it out. So how to read this chart is, in the top right are the ingredients that are outpacing market growth continuously. So they're the biggest, the size of the bubble. 2-year growth is on the vertical axis, and dollar change from a year ago is on the horizontal. So you start to see consistent outperformers, recent outperformers, recent underperformers, and consistent underperformers. Probiotics, no surprise there, is still in that top consistent outperformer category. But along with protein, animal, in general, animal whey, green tea is up there. Caffeine still remains the overall consistent top performer in terms of dollars and growth there. What surprised me a little bit was starting to see some of the DHA products as a consistent underperformer, as well as some of the soy and some of the plant and animal combo. Taurine, that's one of the main energy drinks and one of the main ingredients in some of the bigger energy drinks that are starting to lose some share overall. So not surprised to start to see that in some of the recent underperformer. But this is an interesting chart that we're tracking across all of our channels from natural grocery all the way up through regional independent and food drug mass. So why, right? That's the question then behind it is, why are we seeing some of these things that we are? And we've identified 4 macro trends in consumer mentality, slight shifts, slight just changes from what it was, but it's the move from lifespan to health span. Is everybody familiar with this? Yeah, in the right room for that probably. But it's the little shifts in things and people wanting to get their nutrients, their alternatives to supplements, right? It's part of the reason why we're seeing such a growth in like Poppy and Olipop, right? If you can get those probiotic supplements in a fun soda, why would you take a pill, right? Is some of the mentality that we're starting to hear resonating from the field. New global notions, Ayurvedic herbs going even more mainstream, going across traditional food and beverage categories, turmeric, ashwagandha, protecting the planet, recycled, upcycled, regenerative. Again, this macro trend of, yes, making a good product, and yes, serving the right people, but also protecting the planet while you're doing it. And then this intentional indulgence is a really interesting one because we're starting to see, I know it's a little small, but like a quest that looks and feels a little bit like a traditional Reese's would, but it's focused on high protein, focused on energy, focused on functionality there. So we're starting to see more and more of this pop up across the store. as we look more into the specific health focuses, we took a look at beverages here. And again, this is not going to surprise too many people in this room, I don't think, but mood support, cleanse and detox, digestive health, all really in that top and growing pretty significantly here. Fibers up 183%. A lot of digestive health ingredients are up. Magnesium, as we saw earlier, for anyone that saw that, is up significantly. But energy and hydration still the top two. Shift over to foods, and caffeine is growing in traditional food categories, not just beverage, but food as well. So, think energy bars, right? And gels and wellness bars with a caffeine component, or gum, mints. So, and then, vitamin B12 up there doesn't surprise me, another energy, but also mushrooms, protein. High protein, low sugar, not a shocker, but this seems to be the sweet spots for salty categories. Chips, pretzels, and snacks is that 20 to 25 grams, experiencing about 9% growth. And then probiotics and fibers supporting the biome in confectionery categories, right? Like frozen yogurt, smart sweets, traditional candy confectionery categories. And then, again, adaptogens venturing their way from vitamins and minerals into functional food and beverages. So 63% year-over-year growth on mushrooms. Ashwagandha, 51% up, infiltrating those traditional food and beverage type categories. Saw this coffee, creamers, deli, kombucha, single-serve jerky. Same down here for ashwagandha. So really interesting to see as these ingredients make their way from the vitamins, minerals, and supplements world into traditional food and beverage categories. And again, just more examples here of that, that lifespan to health span, the new global notions, incorporating other herbs and spices from around the world, protecting the planet, and intentional indulgence here. So this is really a preview to this. And again, this is how SPINS has functional food and beverage defined. Everybody's got probably a slightly different definition. But if you ever want to chat about it, if you ever have any questions, or if you want these slides, shoot me an email, let me know, and let's talk about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff, for those insights. Now, I'd like you guys to take out your phones one more time, please. And we have one more question for you all. This is a multiple choice this time. What functional food or beverage are you most interested in purchasing? Yogurt, a wellness or a snack bar, an energy or a sports drink, or a kombucha or a probiotic soda? Lining up with what you discussed, Jeff, the wellness snack bars and the probiotic sodas.
Funny how that works.
I know, right? I'm a big fan of Poppy myself, so. Looks like we have a pretty even between the wellness snack bar and kombucha and probiotic soda. Very cool. And I just want to remind you all, if you just toggle down next to the results up on top, that little arrow, if you click it down, if you would like to ask a question at any point throughout the discussion that we're going to have now, just that middle button with the two little chat bubbles, and you can type in anything, and they'll populate to me, and we'll get to that audience Q&A at the end of the discussion. But now I'd like to welcome up everyone, Jeff, Risa, and Philip, and we're going to get into a little discussion. Is it on? Okay. All right, so Jeff, building off of the presentation, what do you think has prompted the growth of the functional grocery segment of the market? Like more functional products that are growing? What has prompted that?
Yeah, I think, there it is. I think what we're seeing is, again, consumers realizing that, you are what you eat, and these notions of that health lifespan to health span, I think, is such an overlaying theme that people are now realizing that, hey, I can demand more from these traditional categories. I can get the functionality, but I can also get the energy. I can get the indulgence. I can have it all. And I think that the companies that are adapting to that are the ones that are seeing a lot of the big growth right now. So I think we're seeing that just more of the macro consumer shift as people look to live longer, better.
I was going to say health and better for you and well-being. It's all at the top of consumers' minds nowadays. So, Risa, when it comes to formulating, say, beverages, these functional beverages, what are some of the pitfalls to watch out for when designing them from a science and regulatory point of view?
All right. So we heard in the last talk a very great overview of the regulatory that pertains to both foods and functional beverages, and it's a tricky thing to try and navigate. And so I would say beyond just the claims, which is just a part of how one is marketing the product, it's important to make sure from the get-go that the very premise of the product, the use that it's addressing, and any functionality that you're going to be claiming makes sense. And you would not think that would be such a hard thing, but often it's actually not something that's paid attention to. I see someone nodding in the back there. And I unfortunately see it too often that, I'll give an example of something that I came across recently, which was a beverage which had an ingredient in it at homeopathic doses. So it sounds really cool. The ingredient itself was pretty cool, and the use for it was pretty cool. But homeopathic and beverage don't go together, just without going into all the regulatory parts of it. And I see this a lot. I once wrote an article for NBJ called "Innovation Without a Home," and it's unfortunately one of the things that is our hands are kind of tied behind our back sometimes. There are great ideas out there. There are new functions. There are new delivery systems. There are new, ideas of how to address different needs, but they don't fit into a regulatory category that's going to allow you to actually market them. But very often that's not checked before. Sometimes the process is very far along. So I guess one of my watch outs is involve regulatory people very early in your innovation, just to vet out and make sure that your ideas are actually going to be feasible down the road.
Thank you for that. And so, as Jeff explained, and you as well, it's a fact that consumers are seeing functional beverages as advantageous as they look to replace, say, things like traditional supplements with drinkable forms, the sodas, teas, kombuchas, and whatnot. What do you think has prompted this shift? Jeff, maybe?
I'll take a crack at it. Again, I think it's, they realized that they probably weren't getting everything they needed from their diet, right? Which is maybe what made them turn to some supplements. And then they realized that, again, you go back to the food is medicine, and maybe you should be demanding more from the food and beverages that you're drinking and eating. So I think that's really what it all comes back to.
So building off that, Philip, we all know that some of these consumers' choices are driven by what a product does for them inside and outside. But we've learned part of that decision is often informed beyond what does this do for me. So more and more shoppers are taking into consideration the impact that their purchase might have. And increasing numbers have shown that more than avoiding these negative impacts like deforestation and whatnot, they hope to support a positive impact. So how can manufacturers appeal to the angles of our better nature?
I love hearing that question, especially in this setting where the products are basically geared towards people who are thinking, what can I do to my insides and outsides that will make me better in one way or another? We're in the business of ingredient sourcing that is impactful. And when you think about if you're a food or beverage or supplement manufacturer, you are making choices all the time. What kind of ingredients are you going to use in formulating your products? And in an age in which increasing numbers of people are thinking beyond their interior or exterior of their bodies and the rest of the planet and its other inhabitants. There are lots of choices that can be made that have a positive impact on other people or on the world at large because of its environmental impact. And so from our perspective, we are thinking through both of those lenses, people and planet. And within planet, there's climate resilience, and then there is which ingredients are grown in a regenerative way, in rotation with other crops, or maybe in agroforestry settings that can make the planet better as a result of consumption rather than worse as a result of consumption.
I love that. And speaking of the planet, sustainable sourcing and packaging, really huge topics nowadays because people are trying to preserve this planet and make it last longer. What feedback have you received from either customers or people you've spoken to? Are they urging you, as Yolele, to switch to sustainable options, or what does that look like?
Yeah, people, well, in our world, natural foods, a lot of people are very concerned with the sustainability of packaging choices. And of course, it's a limitation. If you're selling foods, the chief role of the package is to protect the contents. And another chief role is to sell the product. But protecting the contents is really important, and the composition of packaging. It's a challenge for us as a conscientious company. How do we package the products in a way that doesn't make the planet worse than if we don't package our products? But people are concerned with it and want everyone to do better. And I think within the world of packaging manufacturing, there is an effort to achieve the same barrier levels and functionality levels that a food manufacturer requires in a more environmentally friendly way.
I was going to say, do you take into consideration shelf life? Does sustainable packaging affect that?
Very definitely. For example, compostable packaging materials are meant to deteriorate. That works well if you have something with a short shelf life, but if you have a product that is intended to last on the shelf for a couple of years, its barrier properties will diminish within its shelf life because the purpose of compostable packaging is to deteriorate.
And Risa, have you seen the same with beverages? Like, are you with functional beverages? Are they focused on sustainable packaging, you think, or is it more so the food category? Do you have anything to add to that?
To be honest, I deal really more with the health aspects and not so much the packaging. I remember a really cool product a couple of years ago. It was a water company, and their big thing was that the package was reusable. And they were actually looking at like little stations in airports, for example, where you could refill their package with water. And I just thought that was really great. I don't know if it ever took off. I don't know. We haven't seen it around. But, I think we see those kinds of things from time to time. But, bottle, carton, that's kind of what's out there for.
Yeah. Companies are adapting. So given the primacy of taste of branding in the functional beverage space, is coupled with the tricky regulatory compliance window, is science still a factor in ingredient innovation, or?
Right. So that's a great question. In terms of the beverage industry, I kind of see it as being in three buckets. So you have whole categories of beverages that I'm not saying they're not science-based, but they're not looking for particular health benefits that require intensive science behind them. So you put in that category, for example, like alt milks or no alcohol, the no alcohol category, et cetera. They don't have to do a whole lot of science. It's really more, who's the target audience and they're feeling a certain need. That's one category. Then there are two categories kind of that are being more forward with the health benefit type claim, or where science would be playing a role. One of them is either ingredients or whole formulations, which are kind of working off of a halo of science, I like to call it. So they're not necessarily doing their own research. They don't have to do their own research. They can kind of piggyback off of what's out there. I know there's a whole thing about piggybacking off of science, but what I mean to say is, for example, any product that has CBD in it, they probably haven't done their own research. Any product that's got mushrooms in it, they probably haven't done their own research. They're working off of a halo of what people understand and know about the health benefits of mushrooms, the health benefits of CBD, and there are many other ingredients that could fall in that kind of a category, and that's fine. They also have to be, face forward. I mean, taste and branding is going to be key. You're not going to sell a product just on its science. It's never going to fly. You have to, it's way too crowded a category, and even if it weren't, just the science is no one's going to buy the drink just for that. But there's a third category, which for me personally is the most interesting category, being a scientist, which is when you have functional ingredients which really have been researched, so sometimes branded, often branded. And some examples of that would be, let's say, like from New Zealand blackcurrant, which has fantastic research behind it for a sports, a pre-sports beverage. It's a powder, and you make a beverage out of it. And why would anyone take blackcurrant for sports if not for the research that they had done? And this is what they're going forward with. So I think, is there a place for science? That doesn't have to be. The beverage doesn't have to be based on science, but it depends on who you are and where you're going with it, and also how much money you have, frankly, and how much resource you have to do the research that's necessary. There has to be a commitment to that science. If you're not working off a halo, you're either in or you're out. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Interesting. And while we're on this topic, can you share an instance maybe where you saw a company that had this great idea that failed because it wasn't carried out correctly? Maybe they relied too much on the science or didn't take taste into consideration?
I don't want to name names. I don't think that. But I have seen it, and actually, a lot of times it's, they're very, very different kinds of, I like to use the word expertise. I'm not sure it's the best word or not, but scientists have one way of working, and then marketers have one way of working, and branders and all this. You've got to have outstanding people in all of those areas. I've seen products where if you have great science, then you had great scientists behind, right? But you also have to have the great marketers. I've definitely seen teams where the focus is on the science. Also, particularly like a few years ago, there was definitely a trend of biotech type people or pharmaceutical type people trying to get into this industry. So they were really science heavy, and they had no idea how to play in this industry versus how you play in the pharmaceutical industry, right? And that did not go well for most of them. They wanted to, but if they didn't hire the right people to handle that other side, the marketing side, it didn't go well. I've seen that in food companies also. The food companies that had heavy science, but they were not used to playing in the dietary supplement realm or functional beverage realm, or they were just I don't want to name any names. It doesn't matter. I'm not just a cookie or something like that. They sell cookies, or they don't really know how to. They didn't know the target audience. They didn't know any of the buzzwords. They didn't know who and why people are buying what they're buying. So there has to be that match. If there isn't the marketing team, the branding team, the people who know the industry and know how to play in the industry, then it's not going to work.
So Philip, I'm sure you can speak to that. Do you have a whole team that focuses for the food aspect of things, of what Reese is discussing, to make sure that your products appeal to the right people and are also functional and whatnot?
Team. I wish we had a team. But yeah, I think what you're talking about, the need to communicate effectively with messages that resonate with the target audience is critical, right? And you have to understand what is going to motivate purchase behavior. Why is someone going to buy your product? And in our case, we've got different segments and different motivations. We've identified those consumer profiles, and we have different messaging buckets in our social media, for example, to address each of those different consumer profiles with their motivations. And not every message that we send out will resonate with every segment, but we'll make sure that we're addressing each of those segments. And so if you're coming up with a benefit and you're used to, I can see, if you're used to selling cookies, for example, what drives the purchase of a cookie is not necessarily what drives the purchase of a pill. And you have
Or
to
even
adjust.
a functional cookie.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, a protein cookie, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And it still has to taste good at the end of the day.
I was gonna say taste is king, right? You can sell something, but people won't buy it more than once if it doesn't taste good. So it can have all the functionality that you want it to have, but it needs to taste good. That's most important. So like you touched on, Jeff, clean labels are important. More brands are focusing on this as the better for you category, and like more healthier products pop up. Philip, how has Yoleli worked to achieve this since its inception and with new products like your chips and whatnot? Are you focusing on creating products with limited ingredients, non-GMO, organic, and things like that?
Yes, we try to focus on, first of all, our foundation as an African food company is African ingredients, and uniquely African ingredients. My partner is from Senegal, and he's kind of the foundation of the business, spreading the glory of the culinary tradition that he grew up with to a wider audience. So for our business, we focus on the ingredients that are grown in West Africa by smallholder farmers in kind of a desert in the Sahel region. It's not quite a desert, but it's very arid. So they have to be climate resilient ingredients. And then within that, knowing that most of our audience is concerned with issues such as GMOs or kosher certification or one thing or another, we try to fit the either dietary, fonio, our principal ingredient platform today, is an ancient grain. It's gluten-free and it cooks in 5 minutes. So we talk about gluten-free on there because there are a certain number of customers who either think that gluten-free is better for them or actually need to consume only gluten-free items. And so we certainly focus on that and try to achieve the other certifications or other qualifications as closely as we can.
And is it hard to achieve these certifications? How does that process? What does that process look like?
It can be very hard, especially if you're a small company working with co-packers. You have to utilize their capabilities, and their limitations become your limitations. So if we want to have non-GMO maltodextrin, we'd rather have no maltodextrin because it's kind of a chemical-sounding ingredient. But if you need maltodextrin to get that great flavor of spray-dried lime juice, which is not the same as dehydrated lime, well, the maltodextrin should be not made from GMO corn. And how can that be sourced? How can that work with our co-packers' sourcing operations? It's a challenge.
Risa or Jeff, what have you been seeing? Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing an increased demand for these certifications, right? Cleaner label, upcycled, recycled, regenerative, especially in a lot of the categories that we're tracking. And but I also think a lot of that does start with the retailers need to commit to it as well. And as enough consumers demand it, retailers will too. So that's that virtuous cycle there. But yeah, we're seeing it across the board in all categories.
One of the things that I'm seeing, which kind of goes back to another heads up, watch out kind of a thing, is things will come across my desk, label approval or something like that, and people say, oh yeah, non-GMO, this, they'll have all of their certifications on there, and then you say, well, did you get all the paperwork from your vendors? Did you get the certification through the appropriate certifier, et cetera? And sometimes people don't realize, oh, you mean I can't just put it on there? Well, no.
That's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
you
Are
can't
there
just put it on there.
sometimes instances where you've seen where people just want to tack it on? I know that's a big industry issue right now, where people are just tacking on these labels and claims, and it's becoming a bit of a problem. Have you encountered that with any clients?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Lisa, can I ask a question? Do you get a lot of brands that are, they're not sure if they should go supplement fact panel or nutrition fact panel and don't either understand the difference or why it matters?
It does come up. It's sometimes people don't know the difference, but sometimes it's actually a very interesting strategic question.
Yeah.
And sometimes a complicated strategic question. What's the kind of background for this question? Why did it come to your head?
So again, in my day-to-day, I work with a lot of supplement companies, but some of them are trying to now, move more away from the supplement fact panel toward the nutrition fact panel, and almost make that strategic change or approach it differently based on the claims they can make and the sense it goes into it. So,
Right.
again, it's just been floating around my head as.
Right. And it's not. Why don't you go ahead?
I just wanted to clarify. Are these supplement manufacturers who want to sell their supplements as food?
No, they're breaking more into food categories. New categories.
Right. So it's not always so simple to just sort of flip the cards around.
Right.
And you want to do things for the right reasons. Someone else earlier today said something like, we want to be a responsible company. We make our choices because we want to be responsible companies. So, perhaps those decisions should be made not just because, it'll help us to say something more. It doesn't always work that way. And particularly with beverages, it's very tricky with beverages because the ingredients have to be grass, if you want them to be in the beverage. So, I guess that's a bit of a different thing. Are we a beverage? Are we a supplement? That comes into play too, which has to do with your volume. How much, how much is it a shot? Is it a beverage? It's definitely, it's a balancing act sometimes, and hopefully it's taken more from a serious point of view as opposed to, hey, if we just switch this, then we'll be able to do that,
Oh no, certainly. But like you said, hopefully everyone's doing everything for the right reasons. But
Right.
We hear it. It's a question we get all the time.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I was walking the show floor this morning. I saw a lot of supplement companies out there are now trying to venture into the functional food and beverage space, but it's a challenge to try and get their ingredient to fit right into certain formulations. So that's some of the discussions I was having this morning. So it's interesting you guys bring that up. But I guess anyone can answer this. What generations, we're going to jump into that, have you seen are most interested in functional foods and beverages? Does it run the gamut, or is it younger generations like Gen Z or millennials like myself that are more interested in these products?
I think it runs the gamut. I think there's certainly, again, with Gen Z, there's probably, you hear about it more. It's more social. You get the microphone effect from social media, right? But I think to my mom, right, trying out creatine, right, and she was never going to try that, right? But I think it does run the gamut. We are seeing it in the consumer insights that there is a lot of new trial in some of these categories that traditionally there weren't.
Philip, who's your core audience? I was going to say, who does Yoeli appeal to?
Our audience skews youngish, but this is a setting in which people are, focused on putting stuff in their bodies to improve their bodies. And I'm a fish out of water, right? Because I eat food because it tastes good, and that's it. But I'm now taking a supplement for the first time, and I'm an old guy. I'm taking a supplement for the first time because my doctor said, you really should take vitamin D. And because it'll lead to, if you don't have enough, it's going to lead to problems and health problems for you. And the doctor said this. So now I'm taking vitamin D. So old people sometimes will change their habits, I guess is what I'm saying.
You can teach an old dog new tricks, huh? Risa, your clients range from younger to older, or what have you been seeing?
Well, my clients are really the ingredient suppliers and the manufacturers, the investors, and the branding people. So, what I see people drinking, I also see that it's across the gamut. And I just know from my own personal experience, although I think that the Gen Zers are like the most experimental out of everybody, and maybe millennials also. My niece, she's my go-to. She tells me what's the newest and the latest and the greatest in their world. You know what I mean?
We've seen a lot of research that Gen Z is really driven by health benefits and sustainability and better for the planet. So they're kind of driving this trend of more functional foods and beverages.
Gen Z and Gen A now.
Yeah, Gen Alpha. You're right. Yeah,
does anybody have a 10 to 12-year-old daughter or niece drunk elephant skincare costing anybody hundreds of thousands of dollars? That's the next wave.
Interesting. Yeah, I have seen that as well. So recent research has also shown that consumers are turning to like functional beverages per se as they reduce their alcohol intake. So do you believe this is why the functional beverage category continues to grow? Or do you see any other factors playing into this other than the reduced alcohol intake?
Yeah, I think it's both, right? I think it's a conscious decision to cut back on alcohol. That's where you see the rise of non-alcoholic drinks, but people still want the social aspect. They don't want to lose that part of their life. But you are seeing, the different, we've been kind of calling them euphorics, right? The buzz without the booze. I got it right this time. I fumbled that one earlier. But I think we are seeing it both. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you go to BevNet to their pitch, I forget what they call them, where new upcoming startups, they're pitching their ideas, or if in Nutrition Capital Network, you see a lot of new ideas, and I'm amazed at how many offerings there are of. Here's a way, not just it's the buzz without the booze. Here's a way to have the feel good, to have the go to the party and feel the way everyone else is feeling without the hangover, and a lot of people have very compelling personal stories about why. And unfortunately, they're stories of things that unfortunate occurrences that they want to go that way, So, and they're inspired to do that.
Interesting. And when it comes to food, Philip, are you seeing the same thing? Are people just beyond health? Are you expanding into, like, you just introduced chips, I know you, Layli. Are you looking beyond, the grain and trying to get into the trendier products, or what is driving like product innovation for you guys?
Well, for us, at Niche African Food Brand, we started selling just plain fonio, a grain, so in the hope that people would take home a grain that they've never heard of and try cooking it up. And there's a limited number of people who are willing to do that. And then we started mixing with spices, so it's a peel-off mix. You can have African flavors on your table in 5 minutes. Oh, I get that. If I'm not worried about introducing something weird flavors to my kids or something. And then salty snacks. That's a simple thing. People are willing to try anything that looks appetizing. And if you give it an African flavor, cool, it's like a bag of chips. What's the worst thing that can happen? I'll have a bag of chips. Maybe I won't like it so much, but I'll probably like it a little bit because it's a salty snack. But for us as a business, innovation is coming from collaboration with food and beverage and maybe supplement manufacturers, because we found ourselves of necessity needing to get involved in the supply chain and building primary agro-processing capacity at industrial scale, meeting global food safety standards, so that these unusual ingredients like fonio and other smallholder grown climate resilient crops could be viable for food manufacturers. And so now, making those ingredients viable, we need to collaborate with food and beverage and ingredient manufacturers on how to identify unique functionalities of each of these ingredients and how to turn them into foods or beverages. And we found the largest opening for innovation is in brewing. We are doing 8 global beer brewing manufacturing collaborations this year around the world, in China, in the UK, in Europe, and in North America, from companies that want to sell fonio beer, and they found it's easy to throw some fonio in their batch. and makes a big difference in the world.
Interesting. That's one I have not heard before. And Risa and Jeff, are you seeing are there any ingredients per se that are challenging in either beverages or foods that you've seen clients that try to work with and it just doesn't work, or without naming names, of course?
Yeah, I can address this. So bitter tasting herbs are there are certain flavor combinations that can go well with that, and then certain combinations of flavors that don't. So if you have certain either herbs or ingredients that have certain off flavors, then you're sort of boxing yourself into the kinds of tasty flavors that are going to work well with them. So I definitely have seen that as it's a food. What's it called? The people who are the food formulators. I'm blanking on what they are.
Technologists.
Yeah, thank you. It's a challenge for them to work with. This is like a little bit. I actually meant to mention this when I was talking earlier about some of the watch-outs, because it's something I see quite often. When a beverage, or really any supplement, when it becomes successful wherever it's developed, whether it's in the U.S. or whatever the home country is. So very often people want to then expand to other countries, or certainly if they're from outside the U.S. is one of the first markets that they want to come into. And that can become challenging with ingredients because each country has their own set of regulations and lists of this additive is approved to go into a beverage, this one is not. We have our grass, other countries have their own systems. And I've definitely seen it where a company comes in with a beverage and like, well, this is your let's say there's 5 ingredients. These are your 2 key ingredients, but you can't market them here. You have to change your formula. So as a watch out, that's just like sometimes when you want to expand it to another country, you're in effect starting from scratch. You're really starting it. It's a new product. So that's just something I want to put out there.
Keep up to
Because
date
people
with
think,
your
oh, okay, yeah, we
regulations.
change our label, we figure out our distribution, we figure out our, where we're sourcing the product from, and we're good to go. And it's often not, from an ingredient point of view, it's often not that simple.
So stay up to date on the regulations beyond the U.S., yes? Great. Well, thank you all. And now I appreciate your input. We're going to jump in. We have a couple of audience questions here that I want to address. And feel free for anyone to jump in. Where do you see the conflict between demand for sustainability and demand for performance and function?
Conflict? I don't see a conflict in those two. I don't see any. No. There are ingredients found in nature. In fact, just about any of the ingredients that you have out there in the show floor that are designed to do something to your body, even if it's something, hyper, taurine or, whatever it is, they're found in nature, right? So, and most of them are not made from rice, corn, or wheat, right? They're made from a wide variety of ingredients, so I don't see any conflict at all.
Good. Risa or Jeff, yeah?
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's the consumers vote with their wallets, right? And at a certain point, there are products that are at too much of a premium if they have to have certain materials or be made a certain way or have certain things that a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford. So I think if there is a conflict, it's at that point of where something becomes too expensive for the consumer. But that's the only conflict that I see.
I have a revision.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, let's say an ingredient becomes super popular and money signs, like dollar signs, oh my God, I should sell this ingredient, I should grow this ingredient. And then it becomes a monoculture, right? Farmers that's where they have something they can sell, and they can't sell other ingredients that would ordinarily grow in rotation with that crop. And then you end up converting sustainable, regenerative farming to unsustainable monocropping, feeding it with chemicals that foul the water. And that's a conflict.
I like that. Yeah, I agree, both from the sustainability aspect and the price point. I mean, prices. We're seeing these products are a little bit pricier on the shelf if they've got, if they're more sustainably produced or they have better ingredients, but that's a good point to make, Jeff. Next question is, how do you see the precise fermentation trend creating animal protein not from animals?
I might have to pass on that one. I don't know if that one exactly is in my area of expertise.
I'm like, yeah, I was going to say on foodandbeverageinsider.com, we do have a bunch of articles covering all the different fermentation technologies, and we do a lot about the alternative proteins, AKA proteins made not from animals. So maybe check out our website and do a quick search of that, and we can get you some more detailed information about that. I'll move on to the next question. Why haven't we seen a better for you challenger to 5-hour energy shots? I feel we keep seeing beverages but not shots, which should be easier to produce, place, and ship.
Because it's really expensive to compete against their marketing budget is why we're not seeing them. They're out there, right? These better for you shots exist, but they're slowly growing, and a lot of them are still very small. They're out there. I expect in the next couple of years that, I mean, if anybody, I don't know if anybody here has access except me, has the data though. I mean, 5-hour energy it's losing share, and it's losing share. Not necessarily just to other energy shots, but if you look at energy as a whole, it is declining in share. So I suspect that we will see that more over time.
Risa, anything to add?
I'm just thinking about so what would be the what would be different in the formulation that you're not already the same thing as 5-hour energy is, which like you said, you can't compete with their marketing budget, right? What would be in there? So it has to be something that you could put into a small amount of fluid. You have to put enough of it into a small amount of fluid and still have an effect. And if it's not caffeine, what is that?
Have you worked with anyone who tried to develop an energy shot or any sort of product like 5-hour energy? No. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, those are all the questions we have, unless anyone else has another question. I want to thank you all for your time and expertise. This has been a wonderful discussion. And just want to remind the audience real quick before you guys leave to scan this again and take the survey. It's the last little toggle on top. It'll take you about 2 minutes. And please do that before you leave here. But if not, thank you so much for attending. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.